Good afternoon, everyone. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. M. Pratibha Punyavati, Assistant Professor and Head Department of English and Research Center, Nesamoni Memorial Christian College, Marthadam, Tamil Nadu, India. She has experience of 23 years of service and served as a NSS trained program officer, as a resource person, and chaired sessions in different colleges. She was a member of 5 colleges in various positions. She participated in more than 35 seminars, workshops, and conferences, both national and international, and presented papers too. Now, I would like Matt to take over the conference. Now, please unmute yourself, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Over to
Yes.
you, ma'am.
In this juncture, I have to thank Mr. Sylvester, Regent Sylvester, who has invited me for this session for the International Virtual Conference in Multidisciplinary Socio-Economic and Cultural Studies organized by Shillong Law College in collaboration with the Cape Comorin. And while saying this, I'm so happy because as I am a citizen of
Ma'am,
Kanyakumari
you're not
district,
audible, ma'am.
not audible. Now am I audible? Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Now you're audible, ma'am.
Okay, I feel
Yes, ma'am.
so
Yes, ma'am.
happy to be in this conference as a member of Kanyakumari district. Anyhow, I have to thank Regent Sylvester. And I think immediately we can pass on to our session for this fifth technical session. And in this session, we have 4 participants. They are Guhan. I think all the 4 are present here. And first, I invite Guhan Priyadarshini to present her paper, Rhetoric and the Translation, Deciphering in the Context of the Legal Case, the Controversy Surrounding Perumal Murugan's One Part Woman. Guhan, this is your time, and I think you can take 10 minutes time to give your presentation, and after that, we can discuss on this topic for 5 minutes. So now it's time for Guhan. Is Guhan Priyadarshini here? Participants, am I audible to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Is Guhan
Yes, ma'am.
Priyadarshini present here? No. Then we can call upon, yes, Ramamurthy. Yes, Ramamurthy. Is Ramamurthy present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I think our topic is anti-caste intellectuals' attitude towards English in the Tamil-speaking Madras presidency.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Handed over to, yes, Ramamurthy.
Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes. Yes.
My PPT is visible. I want to know, ma'am.
No. Now it's visible.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Ramamurthy from Tamil Nadu. I'm doing a PhD in the Center for English Language Studies, University of Hyderabad. My topic is anti-caste intellectuals' attitude towards English in the Tamil-speaking Madras presidency. First, I'll uh, uh, introduce my study. Then I'll talk about research questions. After that, I'll talk about the text that I used to study anti-caste intellectuals' attitude towards English, and then I'll talk about the analytical methods that I used to examine those documents that will help me to study the anti-caste intellectuals' attitude towards English. And finally, I'm presenting findings of each anti-caste individuals individually, and then that follows discussion and conclusion. First, this study is part of my PhD study. Uh, Dalit's attitude towards English. I mean, I studied Dalit students and teachers' attitude towards English in Tamil Nadu, and historical and exploratory study. So, for this history, I examined anti-caste intellectual attitude towards English in Tamil-speaking Madras Presidency. Why anti-caste intellectuals? It means that these are the I have taken three intellectuals in this case. They strongly opposed caste and practices of caste-based discriminations, and they actually they were social activists. They worked among the marginalized and oppressed sections for their upliftment in various means, like in terms of education, in terms of employment, and so on. So they wanted the social reformations in the state. Okay, now I'll move on to my research questions. What was the attitudes of anti-caste intellectuals towards English in the Madras presidency? I mean, Tamil-speaking Madras presidency, from the period 1850 to 1970. So I have roughly taken this period, and because one of these intellectual is uh, 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 born in the year 1854 or something. These are the texts that I have used to study this anti-caste intellectuals attitude. I have taken three anti-caste intellectuals. First, Ayodhya Dasar, I'll be talking about his views on English language. And then Periyar. Periyar is popularly known as Periyar, but his name is E.V. Ramaswamy. And then Annadurai I will talk about. C.N. Annadurai. He was a former chief minister of Tamil Nadu. So these three thinkers' views I will be presenting. And I have taken their texts. These are the following texts I have used to study their attitude towards English. Okay, first, how did I analyze those texts? I used critical discourse analysis. In critical discourse analysis, there is an approach called discourse historical approach. It is an intertextual and interdiscursive approach towards to study discourse and discourse relations between and relations between discourse, text, and genre. So, in this approach, there are three principal, three-dimensional principle. This approach has a three-dimensional approaches. One is content and topic. We have to identify what is the content, which means what is the discourse they were talking about, and then next investigating discursive strategies. What types of strategies they were using to arrive at to discuss those discourse or content or topic. And then the third one is linguistic realization. We have to produce some evidence. These are the evidence we have to show these are the evidence that helps us to say their attitude towards English. For example, we have to give the proper accepts their accept right their accepts like we have to produce some evidence in this case, like and discursive strategies. There were many discursive strategies. Actually, Ray Ziegel and Wodak, they were talking about many discursive strategies in their study. But in my study, I have used only prediction and argumentation. And because I do not need more discursive strategies to study their attitude towards English. I felt like these two strategies are adequate enough to study anti-caste intellectuals' attitude towards English. And to elaborate these strategies, I have taken these two questions from Reisigal and Wodak, and these two questions are useful for me to map out these three dimensions, as well as help me to investigate attitudes of the anti-caste intellectuals towards English language. Now I'll move on to discuss about Ayodhya Dasar. I'll give a brief introduction about Pandit Ayodhya Dasar, and then I'll discuss about his views on English language. First is a Tamil Pandit who knows many languages like Tamil. He knew Tamil, English, Pali, and Sanskrit. So he was a Siddha physician and journalist, and he was a social reformer. Like he wanted to call pariahs. Pariah means depressed classes. In those days, he wanted to name them as Adi Dravidar or Adi Tamilan. It's because, according to him, Parayas are the original inhabitants of the Tamil land. So they wanted to be called as Adi Dravidar or Adi Tamilan. So he sent a memorandum to the respected officer when in 18 in 1881, when the first census was conducted in India. So he wanted to call the Parayas as Adi Dravidar. So Parayas in those days means it includes all the depressed communities. It is actually it is a caste, one of the untouchable caste. But those days the term was used to mean all the depressed classes in the Tamil speaking Madras presidency. So according to Ayodhya Dasar, Parayas are the original inhabitants of the Tamil land. They were originally Buddhist, which means they did not have caste in their lands. But due to the contact of Sanskrit or this Aryan influence, they caste is introduced into their land. So he was reclaiming those Buddhist identity. By reclaiming those Buddhist identity, he was forming anti-caste identity. So he says that he does not belong to caste, any caste. He is an anti-caste person. So again, he wrote many things about this anti-caste movement, revival of Buddhist movement in his weekly, that is called Tamilan or Urvaisa Tamilan, that he was wrote between 1907 to 1914. In this between these years, he was writing a weekly called Tamilan or Urvaisa Tamilan. So when Congress and other nationalist parties called for self-rule, he demanded caste should be abolished. And then second condition he demanded is like equal communal representation should be given to all people. Like all people should be given to equal representation in education, basic livelihood, and employment. Why? Because those days, especially people belong to lower caste or marginalized sections or oppressed sections were denied to get education. So he was writing in his weekly, and as well as he sent letters to the British officers claiming that equal representation should be given in education, basic livelihood, and employment. And then Congress apathy towards these issues. Because of Congress apathy towards these issues, he taken actually he took anti-Congress, anti-Swaraj attitude. So these are the background about him, and I'll present his views on English language. Okay, these are the analysis. I have shown this analysis from my text, and for the rest of the people, the other people, I will not show this kind of analysis. Rather, I present their views on English language. This is for a sample. I'm presenting. I'm giving this analysis. Okay, left side is I have given main topic. On the right side, I have given the excerpts. That means linguistic realization. And the top within the column, I have shown that argumentation. It's a discursive strategies that Ayodhya Dasar used to that Ayodhya Dasar used to discuss about his views on English language. Okay. First topic is learning English reduces caste and religious differences, which means like he is saying that actually all other Indian languages, including Hindi, actually they promote unnecessary division among people. Rather, English, by learning English, casteism, religiosity, deception, and discrimination will be abolished. He believes in English, that English will eradicate caste. And then learning English will result in better wisdom and intelligence all over India. Second topic. Why? Because he believes that all the scientific inventions are made in English. It is not in any other Indian languages. So it is the English language that has the abundant knowledge. So if we learn English language, we will get all the knowledge and wisdoms. That is what he that is what his views. Um, and then third one is language like Hindi creates caste and religious divisions. Actually, he was forming his attitude towards English because of his attitude towards Hindi. We can say that because he opposed Hindi become the common language of India. Because language like Hindi creates futile divisions, unnecessary religious struggle among people. That is what he was telling. Like because language like Hindi has like myths that is go against people, like they that will not allow people to treat everyone equally. So that is what his views about English language as well as about Hindi. So the second strategy, discuss strategies, prediction, that was talked about like these are the prediction he used. Like on the left side I have given object, agents or actors. These are important in attitude study. On the right side I have discussed about attributes or predictions. For English, he says it is well respected, celebrated worldwide by all nationalities, and then it is wise, intelligent, and prudence will abundant if people learn and speak English. Like people will be wise, intelligent, prudence. Like if they learn English language, and then English eradicate caste and religious differences. These are the attributes he has given to the English language. And coming to Hindi or Sanskrit, he was telling that it is the language of caste and the religious struggle. And again, coming back to native speakers of English, he was talking about the British. They are wise and intelligent. Why he was saying this? Because British people, they treated everyone equally. They gave respect for the marginalized and oppressed sections. People in the marginalized and oppressed section, they gave employment, they gave education, they gave access to public properties like road and all. So for this reason only, he is saying that they are wise and intelligent. And coming back to Indians, pro-British Indians, which means he says that actually he demands people should learn English language because it gives us wisdom, intelligent, and rational prudence. We have to learn English language and stay faithful towards the British. That is what he said. And then he was talking about speakers of English language. And he predicted them as deceitful and discriminatory because he was having all these views from based on his understanding about social issues happening during this period. Okay. Now I'll move on to present Ramasamy, E.V. Ramasamy. He is known as Periyar, and his views about English language. And first, I'll briefly I talk about his background, and then I'll move on to present his views on English language. He is a social reformer, atheist, and rationalist. And he actually he joined in Congress. He was a strong follower of Gandhi, and in Tamil Nadu he became the member of the Congress, president of the Congress between the year 1923 and 24, and he became the secretary.
Excuse me. You can give the abstract of your papers and only stick on to the topic. Okay, no need of all these writers' biography and all. Just you give the abstract of your paper, as we have the time limit of completing the paper. Okay, go on.
Okay, ma'am. Now I will talk about only their views. I'll not give background information. I felt background informations are more important in discourse historical approach. That's why I include other information, ma'am. Okay. If there isn't any time, I'll move on to present their views only, ma'am. Shall I?
Yes, you can.
Yes, these are the views of Perrier. Perrier considers he considered English as the language of scientific invention. Before understanding his views on English language, we need to know what language according to him. He says language is for exchanging ideas, must be good enough for understanding matters. It must suit the characters of the land, the country, and people's lifestyle, customs, and characteristics. So it is a war tool for struggle. So like war tool, it has to be modified periodically. So in his views, like for instance, to strengthen the Tamil language, it was once the more civilized language, and now it is lacking behind because of the influence of Sanskrit elements in it. So in order to revive this English language, the Tamil language, we have to remove all the elements, Sanskritized elements from the Tamil language, and we can take ideas or words from any language which should support goodness, well-beings of the Tamil people. So this is what his views on the views about language. So now I'll talk about his views on English. English is the language of scientific invention according to him, because he thought telegraph, electricity, aeroplane, and X-ray, all these things were made in English language. They were invented in English language. They were not invented in Tamil or Hindi. So these are the views. These are the for this reason only he considered English is the language of scientific invention. And then second, we use like English is the language of liberty, equality, rationality, and other socio-political, democratic, and progressive ideas. He was like when slavery was the joy of life. For Indians, English language gave the knowledge of liberty, equality, rationality. So because of this only, they liberate themselves from slavery, and like it made all, including everyone, think rationally and exclude anything irrational or unacceptable. For instance, he was talking about like uh, it helps Tamils to exclude irrational practices such as caste. And then English, the English language gave Tamils and other Indians the knowledge of democracy, equality, and the knowledge that says men and women are equal, and the knowledge that says all ancient moral law should be demolished, and equality should be maintained. All these are his views, which contributed him to say this English is the language of liberty, equality, rationality, and other socio-political, democratic, and progressive ideas. We got all this because of the English language. That is what his view. And it was English language that liberated Tamils from the northern dominance and made us think rationally. It was like he thought Tamils were dominated by the northern people, especially those elements, Sanskrit elements in Tamil, as well as their contact with northern people made them made them upper hand on these Tamil people. So in order to get rid of those people, so he was suggesting that English language gave them some ideas about freedom. And so they were now talking about to remove all those Sanskritized elements from Tamil language. They want to become independent. So this is what his views. And he considers English takes people to the world of knowledge faster than Tamil. He was saying that Tamil is more civilized than any language. And he was saying that even though he was saying Tamil is more civilized than any language, more useful than any language, he supported a lot about a lot. He supported English a lot because all those knowledges were available in English. So he wanted all Tamil people to learn English language. Actually, he was saying somewhere like he would be happy if English language becomes the language of Tamil. So he's saying that it all suggests that he was a strong proponent of the English language, and he says like Hindi should not enter into Tamil land, and because it is not useful for Tamil people, rather it will be useful for other people to dominate Tamil. Okay, I'll move on to uh, Annathurai's views on English language. Okay. Anna, in his parliamentary speech, he stated this: Hindi should not become the official language of India, whereas English must be retained in its position, because Hindi is the language of some people. Some people in India speaks Hindi as mother tongue. It goes against people who learn Hindi as a second language or third language, because people who speak Hindi as a mother tongue will preponderate in all civil service and other government sectors. Because why? Because he was saying like this. He thought people who learn Hindi as a second or third language cannot compete with people who speak Hindi as their mother tongue. So for this reason, he considered Hindi is unjust towards the large section of the people in India. And then he considered English is a convenient tool where like it is foreign to everyone. English language is a foreign to everyone. It is foreign to people in UP. It is a foreign to people in Tamil Nadu. It is a foreign to people in Uttar Pradesh and Punjab, everywhere. So it can distribute advantages and disadvantages evenly. For this reason only, he was saying English must be retained in its position as an official language. And then the second important view is English is a linked language. And people were talking about two different linked language. One is Hindi, another one is English. And he was saying English can be used as a linked language between India as well as across the world. Why we do not want another linked language for communicating within India. So English can be used as a linked language between the state, between India as well as across the world. Then he was saying English is necessary to stay connected with the rest of the world and access the world knowledge. He was saying that like Shelley, Byron, Keats, Coleridge, Emerson, Bacon are not foreign to us in the strict sense. In the strict sense, they are world citizens, world teachers. The language enshrining their thoughts should not be discarded just because it comes from another country. So he was saying that all these people are world citizens and world teachers. So just because of English is a foreign language, we should not discard it. Whereas he says that for our convenience, for our expediency, we choose the medium. So it is not the imposition of colonization anymore. So he said all these views on English language. He had all these views, though he had all his views on English language, and he did not like he said that he was more proud of Tamil than English language. He wanted to identify himself, like his immediate identity was Tamil than English. So why? Because he was more proud of the literary tradition in Tamil Nadu, and he was proud of the ancient culture, because he himself stated somewhere that ancient Tamil culture was casteless. So these are the views they have. I have come to discussion and conclusion. These anti-caste thinkers wanted to preserve the ancient Tamil culture that was casteless and egalitarian society. In this process, they found English language as an alternative or opposition to Hindi or Sanskrit dominance. They also believed that English, a language of equality and rationality, can be used to destroy the caste system. There, some of these are some of the emergent perspectives developed by this anti-caste intellectual during the late 19th and early 20th century to oppose or overthrow Hindi or Sanskrit dominance over Tamil. This goes against reproduction or orientation or deterministic perspectives, where language are seen as monolithic, abstract structures that come with a homogeneous set of ideologies and functions to spread and sustain the interest of the dominant group. Whereas, like this anti-caste intellectual were aware that the English language has the emancipatory potential and enables them to rise above the domination. They had resistant perspectives, which implies that they desire to use English in a different way that would turn its function to serve their own purposes. So it is clear from these findings that although the spread of English is repressive, it can be used as a weapon of the oppressed, as happened in South African freedom struggle. So, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramamurthy, for your wonderful presentation. And now, dear participants, do anybody has any discussion or any question over his paper? I will give 2 to 3 minutes for discussion. Any participants? Nobody. Okay, Mr. Ramamurthy, you have done your work well. You have analyzed the 3 persons, that is Ayodhi Dasar, Periyar and Annadurai in your work very well. And you have told about how they have analyzed the languages. That is, you have analyzed 2 languages mainly, and another Tamil and Sanskrit as the next language. First, your paper is based on analysis between Hindi and English. And anyhow, you have done a good analysis by all the 3 persons' perception over the language, and you have also done a good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next one is Sovik Datta. Is Sovik Datta?
Hello, ma'am. Good evening.
Yes, welcome. Okay, I think your paper is Tactful Trends, Cultural Connotations and Projections of Personality via Costumes of Devadas' Hindi film adaptation.
Right.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Over to you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My paper is on Devdas. So, Sarachandra Chattopadhyay's Devdas was published in the year 1917. Perhaps the most adapted among all his works, this novel, for its exceptional story and unforgettable characters, added a unique dimension to the author's contemporary life and later to Bengali society in general. Devdas has become an integral part of Bengali culture with each passing day. A number of elements cause the appeal of cinema as a medium for the viewing public. Films are a totality of various aspects. A collected effort of each person involved in its making adds to and defines its final output. Screen adaptations often recreate the literary work in a new context, both at the surface as well as its subtext. The popularity of a film often comes from an actor playing a part, lavish sets, locales, props, costumes worn, and adornments used. Not only do they captivate the filmgoer and often become more attractive than the stories they set out to tell, commercial cinema has been thriving more on paraphernalia and lesser on artsy, intellectual facets of the concerned productions. The story, its adaptation, and attempts at fidelity are secondary in case of several screen renditions of novels. What is important is the visual pleasure acquired by the audience, a total summing up of the cinematic experience. It is one of these apparently tangential aspects that this paper intends to pick up: costumes. This paper seeks to illustrate how costumes and attire embody facets of personality, negating any innocence or lack of deliberateness associated with their use. The portrayal of a character in a particular attire is a silent statement that defines their characteristic traits. Moreover, the transition of costumes from one frame to another is often intended to exhibit alteration in mindset or emotional state of the concerned person. It shall further be examined what uses and changes of their wardrobe mean in the context of cultural studies, in terms of semiology, self-fashioning, portrayal of women, and issues of typecasting. To take up Devdas's character, Devdas's transformations of attire are in tandem with his personality. This is the culmination of his residence period in the city, Calcutta, for adaptations of 1935 and 1955, London for later films. Borua's protagonist, which is the 1935 director, under the influence of Chunni Lal, clearly transits from simple Bengali attire to common trends of British Calcutta: jacket, collared shirt, English hat, shoes, and cane. Upon returning home to the village, Paro is stunned to see him look every inch an Englishman. The film accurately juxtaposes his appearance when he returned from England with his subsequent conversion to traditional attire as he inches towards alcoholism and helplessness. Despite its statement on his changing state of being, this remains secondary to performance and emotiveness. Bimal Roy's 1955 rendition more or less carries the same wardrobe, barring the hat. One wonders if the elimination was deliberate. Was Roy desirous of effacing the specific time in which the film was being located? Was this done to give the film a timeless quality, rather than a recreation of a historical period? Roy's male lead at best only appears partly anglicized. Moving away from its predecessor, he dons a jacket with conventional trousers and an Italian collared full-sleeve shirt, leaving the periodic location of the character ambiguous. Paro's friend Monorama announces Devdas's return. I saw with my own eyes a cane in his hand, a wristwatch, buttons, and gold chain. He has become a true gentleman. But the man has changed too. Before every year, he came for the holidays, and then only once every 2 or 3 years. Just like the plausibility of its sets, Devdas's couture it comprises of Western attire, aesthetic and fashionable, but never an exaggeration. His traditional wear also remains in conformity with cultural coordinates of his habitat. Bhansali's extravagant adaptation heavily focuses on Devdas's revamped costumes, much like the imported commodity brought from an alien territory. He returns dressed as a Western dandy of undetermined time. Negating connotations of context, his dandy-like dressing must nevertheless be credited for impressing upon the viewers the change in the man himself. The cultural clash between Indian and British cultures, illustrated through dress, is largely ideological. A large hat, collared shirt, white polka dotted, red bow tie, three-piece suit, and even a raincoat, in addition to two-tone shows, cane, and an ivory cigarette holder, universally defined Western clothes that are not out of place in a village of Bengal, but also at entirely odds with its climate. This, coupled with the fact that for the greatest part they seem out of size for Devdas, can be read as a man being out of place in a culture he doesn't belong to. His transition to suitable traditional wear symbolizes a desperate attempt to revive his indigenous affiliations, but that is when his decline, ironically, commences. Both his Western and traditional outfits are unbelievably magnificent and grand. The film's unwavering eye for detail, for colors, silk, cotton, Bengali saris, chikankari embroidery work on his kurtas, the model golden buttons on his shoot style of the hat entails commendable aestheticism. In case of Dev D, both with respect to childhood flashes and adult track, the associated semiotics of character show his poor choice of Western attire. His signature dress code comprises cap, aviators, a shirt open till the chest, often a scarf, knitted jacket, and a lined coat, brown trousers, and dual-shaded sneakers. In symphony with the man he is, hackneyed, insensitive, selfish, ill-behaved, as he appears to be for the largest time. One can't help but question his image as the protagonist. The negativity and shadiness inherent in his dress lead to a lack of sympathy, empathy, and a graded alienation for his viewing public. Likewise, Sudhir Mishra's protagonist Dev only utilizes attire suited to a purpose, almost a conscious attempt at breaking the fourth wall in his drama. Dev is dressed like a commoner, not reflecting the political legacy he was born into, but slips into a trademark kutta white pajama the moment he must appear and speak on the dais as a political leader. His frequent changes in attire exposes inconsistencies owing to conflicts, both personal and political. The mutated portraits of Devdas in each subsequent adaptation can hardly be separated from their historical contextualization. Barua's Parvati is appalled at his outward transformation, his affiliations to the urban rich, appeasement of the British, and cultivation of colonial mindset. Roy's adaptation sees it as a positive marker of gentle manliness, apparent in reactions of Manorama, Paro, and the villagers. Bhansali's protagonist must return from London in appropriate disguise and transition later to make and engage NRI audiences through its return to the roots philosophy. Kashyap's Dev sheds his Anglican attire, refurbishing himself like any other Punjabi village boy. To the conception that Kashyap and Mishra's protagonists subscribe, clothes in a relocated context, away from the period drama film, make a statement on individual character. The use of sets, boasting of grandeur and garbs of plenitude are deliberate. The depiction of Bengal is also equally deliberate. The self-fashioning of Devdas's character also opens up the debate on tradition versus modernity. Paro in the 1936 film was the most basic in terms of portrayal among the entire range of adaptations. Simple Bengali style cotton saris typically worn by women in her society. The film prioritizes emotions and expressions rather than outfits, jewelry, and locations. Paro in Roy's film is similar. Flowy silk and cotton saris with traditional borders. Bhansali's version is a revamped, state-of-the-art portrayal of Paro with gorgeous saris, solid gold ornaments, and heavy makeup, with the color medium helping manifold. This is cut down in Kashyap's depiction of Paro, which is a traditional girl with a sanitized image. She's covered up in salwar kameez suits, with given her location in rural Punjab, later in Delhi. Similarly, Mishra's heroine is also clad in Indian wear with no attention to her attire. Despite being a top-notch courtesan, Chandramukhi in Barua's film is graceful despite her basic makeup and choice of ritualistic Bengali saris. Roy's portrayal adds an element of trend with the choice of lavish lehengas and flourished dupattas, coupled with expensive ornaments. Bhansali's Chandramukhi is larger than life. Each costume worn by her is an adaptation of a designer masterpiece. She's dressed in Banarasi brocades, blouses with finest embroidery, choicest silk saris, and chunky gold ornaments. The reputed green dress worn for a dance sequence apparently weighed 30 kilograms, along with the traditional red and white sari worn in another dance number in her professional frame. Fashion designers were employed for this after adequate research was conducted, which makes a statement on what it was meant to be. This ascending graph of glamorization is representative of her transgressive profession, despite an pious constancy towards her unrequited lover. This stylization is thrown off gear with Kashyap's Chanda, who is fascinated by the character of Chandramukhi but wears a shirt and skirt as a schoolgirl, tees and denims as a girl next door, or does role playing in terms of her customer oriented profession. She is a shapeshifter. Mishra's Chandni, who is Chandramukhi, however, is unique. Her office formals all through the film, added to her basic makeup and neatly turned out disposition, enable her as a woman of the world, bringing her professional role into indoor spaces where she operates most frequently. The three protagonists exhibit changes in wardrobes that were in tandem with changing facets of personality embodied by them. To prevent the 1917 novel from appearing dated, this must have been written by some kind of commercial exigencies. The attempt to appease the audience is of paramount importance. A viewing public must be given enough fodder to chew on and appreciate. Unique selling points must be provided in a market-oriented industry to achieve as much as a semblance of success. Hence, the alterations in characterization, situations, and context witnessed across this five-film spectrum and the legitimacy they claim access to. Rola Barthes, who is the cultural studies figure I'm looking at, in his book, The Fashion System of 1967, attempts a detailed semiotic delineation of subtext and messages conveyed through attire in connection with the individual self, navigating through fissures and contradictions. Fashion for him is a dream of identity. Its role, definition, and semantic identity is a cultural construct. The ability of fashion to make a statement conveyed in a specific language, along with material, ideological, practical affiliations, vocalize its wearer through cultivation of identity, setting him apart from the crowd. The semiotics of fashion is the study of how humans take particular socio-cultural strands through their attire. It is the science system that silently generates and communicates meanings about people, endowed with the ability to signify a definite identification, vocation, social rank, gender identity, or group enlistment. Fashion also becomes a harbinger of change with its inventiveness and innovation. However, its typecasting tendencies have been accused of confining people in terms of the status quo. The unique feature behind clothing is its variation of interpretations dependent on its situational location, cultural ramifications, and social significance. Clothing links to society. Its ambiguities in understanding it stem from the obliviousness of exactitude regarding signification of make, color, material, poise, and other modes of cultural expression. The same aspects have varied connotations in different societies and cultures. The semantic products of fashion are almost entirely dependent on cultural symbolism. Particular dressing styles and the outfits themselves attempt to generate meaning. A uniform means one thing to Chanda. It generates meaning through the symbolism evoked, that is culture specific, arbitrary, and in tacit complicity of people within a culture. Fashion is unrestricted to professional roles. It often becomes a marker of a person's individual identity and location. Bengali saris, the manner of wearing them, are region specific. Likewise, a clear demarcation is maintained in the homely woman Paro and the dazzling courtesan Chandramukhi, who represents a woman of the world. Fashion trends are popularized and amplified by celebrities, commercial ramifications of which are important in a market-driven economy. Lehengas worn by Madhuri Dixit, the jewelry that Aishwarya Rai is decked in are testimonials of the cult status of their wardrobe and accessories, much after the film moved out of theaters. To conclude, fashion is eternally in a state of flux and cannot be frozen. Chanda and particularly Chandni, modern versions of Chandramukhi wear pants, originally clothing for women, but for men, but spilling over into women's wardrobes with the passage of time. In Devdas, upon his return from London, Devdas is seen in trousers. People change, ideologies shift, and trends alter in symphony with these. A mapping of attire in the adaptations of Devdas reaffirms fashion as a science system, with perpetual changes in signification depending on context, location, and temporality. Barth felt there was no fashion without discourse. While this may not necessarily be true, it would be wise to reconcile with the notion of fashion inaugurating discourse with regard to its application. Fashion texts, according to him, are keys to opening the invisible. This paper reasserts the relevance of this mention, reminding one that fashion is barely literary in its interactions with the outfits themselves, laying aside its luxury of connotation for the world at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Savik.
Thank you.
Your paper is nice. Usually, nobody take this topic for a presentation or for thesis, but your selection is so nice, and
Thank you,
your paper is very commendable, and I appreciate your paper. And it's very quite natural. That is our costumes always that project our nationality, our state, from which state we are, then our culture, gender, caste, religion, profession, character, everything will be projected only through our costumes. And you have chosen a film, just a film for that, for our paper, and you have chosen a very good theme for your paper. I appreciate your paper very well. It's so nice. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
The next is, I think it's Swati is in Madhavi. Is Swati present here? No, Swati is not present. Then I call Guhan
Yes,
Priyadarshi.
ma'am, I am present.
You are present.
Yes, yes.
Okay, you can do your presentation. After that, Guhan Priyadarshan can do your work and you be ready. And
Sure, ma'am.
okay, now it's a Swati in Madhavi. And I think your paper is in subaltern voice. Okay, hand it over to you. Proceed.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
My
Yes,
PPT
good
is
evening.
visible.
Okay, go on.
My PPT is visible, ma'am.
Yes, visible.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Swati Madavi. I am a research scholar of Sant Gadge Baba, Amravati University. And my topic is The Subaltern Voice, a study on the culture of the tribals of Arunachal Pradesh with special reference to Mamang Dais, the legend of Pensam. Now I move on the introduction. Northeast India is surrounded by an awe-inspiring landscape, different group of tribal people, their culture and custom. Contemporary writers from this region aspire towards a vision outside the tapered culture channel and they represent a shared history. In their writing, the culture memory is showcased and the power of feeling overflow the labor of method and craft. Mamang Dais gave out a rare glimpse into the ecology, culture, surrounding of the tribal people and history of the land of the down little mountains. Arunachal Pradesh, through her novel The Legend of Pensam, the word Pensam in the title means in between, but it may also be interpreted as the hidden space of the heart. The tribes here are adherents of animist faith. They believe in a coexistence with the natural world along with the presence of spirit in their forests and rivers. Now I move on the what is subalternity. Subalternity is a person who are socially, politically, and geographically outside of the hegemonic power of structure. What is subalternity? In postcolonial studies, in the critical theory, the term subaltern designated and identifies the colonial population who are socially, politically, and geographically excluded from the hierarchy of power of imperial colony and from their metropolitan homeland of an empire. Anthony Gosavi coined the term subaltern to identify the culture hegemony. The first and the foremost leader of this literary movement was Ranjit Gua, who had written on the present uprising in India. Subaltern studies have emerged from Marxism and post-structuralism. Their major focus is on socio-culture and historical features of the marginalized communities. It studies the subject of people as subordinate in terms of class, caste, age, gender, and class divide based on the concepts such as civilized and primitive, rich and poor, high caste and low caste. Now I move on the my first slide, subaltern people. Subaltern studies have emerged from Marxism and post-structuralism, and their major focus is on socioculture and historical features of marginalized communities. It studies the subject of people as subordinate in terms of class, caste, age, gender, and class divided based on the concepts such as civilized and primitive, rich and poor, high caste and low caste. The lives of the marginalized subalterns are marked with the lack of choice of deprivation, loneliness, subjugation, subordination, and realization. The subaltern tribal people are explained by exploited by two major agencies such as administrator and rich capitalist people contribution to the manufacturing resources. The subaltern tribal people are struggling for existence during crisis and unfavorable conditions, both natural and man-made, but do not accept the hegemony of the so-called civilized society. They raise their voice against the narrative prose on them which rather their culture identity, their independence and history. Now, I explain the brief outline of the Legend of Pensam. The Legend of Pensam novel written by Mamang Dai. Mamang Dai is a famous writer of Arunachal Pradesh. He is a tribal writer. The Legend of Pensam. Pensam in the language of Adis supposedly means in between, a small word where everything can happen and everything can be occupied. When the small boat that we call life sail along somehow in a peaceful or rainy weather, where the life of a man can be measured in the span of song. Mamang Dai, in her book The Legend of Pensam, create a fantasy world in the reader's mind. A village whose wall of perspective spirit trees has been cut down in now expressing being exposed to the wide world. It is a collection of stories that explore universal theme like intimacy, tragedy. Though the legend of Pensam, in between there is a clarity in national area, and in between the pages of the legend of Pensam, the people of the book seems to have found that clarity of purpose. All the characters have this clarity of being, confidence in occupying area and pages, and K Sarasara, that is a rare to see. Now I move on the next slide, the tribal culture. India is a land with a various culture, tradition, race, religion, and caste. Among all the rest, tribes are the most ethnic group of Indian society. Tribals language, mostly Adi speak in a Abhor and Lobha language, culture. Festivals and dance. The Adis celebrate the number of festivals. In particularly, their prime festivals are Aran, Dongin, Slong, Podi, Barbi, and Ithor. Adi's lifestyle. The Adi practices wet rice cultivation and have a considerable or agriculture economy. Rice serve as the staple food for them along with the meat and other vegetables. Religion. The major of Adi's traditional follow the tribal Doni Pola religion, worship of gods and goddess like a Keen, Nain, Doing Board, Gumin, Sowing, etc. Then my next slide is subaltern voice. Mamang Dice, the legend of Pensam. Mamang Dice, the legend of Pensam is an intricate web stories, but that explore the hidden fact of life and is a beautiful mixture of myth, history, tribal beliefs, and custom of Adis, literally called hill people. The word Pensam in the title means in between, but it may also be defined as the hidden space of the heart. Mamang Dice start the book with the story of boy Hoxo, who fell from the sky and was catched by Luther to his village. Luther and his friend had been drafted to work on a huge road project by the British opposite the Sang village. When they come back after 3 years, they carry along with the basket with the child. Luther's friend tells his villagers, there were a great noise and fire in the sky, and our son fell to earth, accepted by the tribe unquestioningly. Hoxo goes on to lead an eventually life of play, a vital role in the stories that unfold. At the end of the story, the aged Hoxo and his granddaughter are spending time with an antique pair of binoculars. The stories in between take the readers through a fascinating ride over a long period and tribal beliefs, from the legend of the origin of the tribe to modern time of development that throw their lives and customs into disorder. Their stories reflect a half revealed and half controversial world, sometimes so be felt by the subconscious rather than seen with the ordinary eyes. anything can happen in this small world. Being supporters of the spiritual faith, the tribes are trusted in coexistence with the natural world along with the presence of spirit in their jungle and rivers. The novel recounts the historical development in the tribal areas with the advent of Britishers. The elders were brainwashed and dominated by the Migloos into considering themselves inferior, and the were forced to stratify their energy and determination. The love relationship between the tribal girl Nenem and British Captain David take us to a different planet together. It is an enigma how, despite all their difference, the two strangers were drawn to each other in the Forlor Hills. When they parted, Nenem said to herself, "No one dies of love. I loved him, and now I am enough of my own." Nenem loved her land. She simply could not part from her space and resume in another new world. This made her sacrifice her lover David. Years later, she rising to her faith and get married to Cow. The village headman sees that all the rites are carried on according to their customs. He keeps awake day and night and take care that no right to miss, as it was a consideration of misfortune. Things change, but Nenem was like the river, constant nourishing the self-possessed. Then my next side is conclusion. To sum up, Mamangdai has defined the real life condition of the Adi tribe in Arunachal Pradesh. See, she has pointed out the subaltern voice of the tribals and portrayed the hidden space of their lives through her tales. Her fiction and non-fictional works have a penchant from reworking past structure, though modes of storytelling. Though the legend of Pensa, Mamangdai brilliantly present the culture of tribals of Arunachal Pradesh, subaltern voice beliefs, ritual of Adis as their mode of significance. These are the references of my topic. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Swati. It's a nice presentation. Usually, in subaltern voice, we say like this. We consider only the people based on culture, caste, like that. But it is different as you have chosen a tribal group and you have shown out how the tribes are made to be downward by the others, and the subalternism to the tribes you have explained very well, and you have used Marxism, the colonialism, and the theories are used by you. That is also very nicely collaborated with the papers. Nice, Swati.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Now it's the time for Guhan Priyadarshan. Is Guhan Priyadarshan? Yes, it's the time for you.
Yeah, so
Now you
good
can
evening.
present your papers.
Yeah, so thank you, Professor Punyavati. I don't actually have a presentation. It's going to be an oral one. The topic of my paper is rhetoric and translation, deciphering in the context of the legal case the controversy surrounding Perumal Murugan's One Punch Woman. So this is the topic. This is the topic of my paper. So before I get into the paper, I think it's significant to summarize what One Part Woman by Perumal Murugan is all about. So this is a tale set in times immemorial, and because of the contextual reference, we get to know that this is somewhere between before the independence of India, and it is a novel that revolves around two characters, Punna and Kali. So both of them were actually childless. Two couple, they are a couple, and they were childless. And it was set around the town of Tiruchendur, which is located in Namakkal district in Tamil Nadu. So they actually partake. I mean, the Punna, the wife, actually partakes in a temple ritual. So this temple ritual the temple ritual is this, you are supposed to go around the temple. Then this ritual involves copulation with the young men, and this became the site of conflict because Punna and Kali were, characterized to have been belonged to a particular caste, which is dominant in the western part of Tamil Nadu. So they kind of, the caste outfits in 2014, they started protesting against this novel for the alleged misrepresentation in codes. So what I'm trying to do in this paper, what I have done in this paper is I have tried to exhume the controversy, not from the perspective of the surface level understanding that it was due to the misrepresentation of a particular community or the historical misrepresentation of a particular community. Rather, I'm trying to situate this controversy from the perspective of rhetoric. This novel was originally published in 2010 in Tamil in the title Madhurabagan. While talking about the title in his authorial preface, Perumal Murugan says that Perumal Murugan actually says that his titled. So, and he actually says that like he was kind of he was kind of amazed by the facts that he found out during his groundwork in and around Tiruchengood. He actually calls it in Tamil as Ragasya Upakaril Undre, meaning one of the secret strings. So one of the significant difference between the source text in Tamil and the translated text in English is that the translated text does not carry an authorial preface or a foreword, which was actually present in the source text. Now, it is significant to know what is articulated in the authorial preface. So basically, Perumal Murugan actually talks about, he actually kind of implies that he has had done a groundwork, a field work in and around Tiruchengood, and he kind of came to a conclusion that there were some historical sources to kind of imply this ritual that he discussed in the novel. So this was actually absent in the source text. I mean, it was actually absent in the translated text. But the controversy actually started after the publication of the translated text. It's not a coincidence, but if you analyze closely, the controversy is tied actually to the tied to the translated text. Now, as there is an absence of authorial preface, which would suggest a historical interpretation of the text, there should have been no controversy surrounding the translated text. But what actually happened was the other way around. So this is the reason I'm approaching this text, I'm approaching this controversy from the notion of rhetoric. So rhetoric has had a very long tradition dating back to the ancient Greek times. In classical Greek philosophy, rhetoric is employed as an antithesis to dialectics. So, Aristotle refers to dialectics as an act of conversation among a group of people. You would put forth an argument and there would be a counter argument, and then you would come to a synthesis of the argument and the counter argument to come to a conclusion. This is dialectics. On the other hand, rhetoric is more like a monologue. For example, a politician delivering a political speech, because the person you have opposite to the speaker is a listener. He is a passive listener who has no active participants in the speech. I mean, it's a monologue, unlike the dialectic. So so rhetoric was initially characterized as something antithesis to dialectics. And this conception was actually appropriated by Wenzi, who was one of the significant critics of Chicago School of Criticism in 1950s. And he kind of implies that rhetoric is nothing but the art of persuading, the listener or the reader. And he was also implying that rhetoric is something that is embedded deeply in fiction. So so the limitation of my paper is that I do not seek to historically validate the incidents and events described in the novel, either to approve or disapprove of the incidents. Rather, I will seek to examine the controversy from the perspective of rhetoric that is contained in the novel. Chicago's school of criticism is actually contradicting the more popular new criticism, school of new criticism. School of new criticism believes that the signification of a fiction one could draw is limited to the readers, whereas Chicago school, on the other hand, implies that there is some kind of intention. I mean, the author has some kind of intention, and he tries to convey that intention to the reader. So this is actually the to summarize rhetorical criticism in a single word, this could be this, that the author actually has an intention, and then he would try to communicate that intention. He would continuously try to persuade the reader to kind of agree with him. Now, while talking about rhetoric, Wayne Booth actually implies two kinds of rhetoric. One is intrinsic and another one is extrinsic. So extrinsic rhetoric is something that exists outside the fiction, exists outside the actual plot and the narration. For example, I have talked about the authorial preface or foreword beforehand. So this actually comes under extrinsic rhetoric. And for example, even a book cover could be an extrinsic rhetoric, because it has the capability to influence the ideas of the reader about the text he is going to read. So authorial preface, by saying that authorial preface is an extrinsic rhetoric, and as we have had an authorial preface in the Tamil version, we get to see that the meaning that is generated by the reader is kind of linked to this authorial preface. Now, we have seen that in the authorial preface, Perumal Murugan actually talks about, he kind of conveys that this novel has the historical connotations. So there is this fear that the history has been misrepresented. So that is one of the premise that I have established. The second premise is that we do not actually have an authorial preface in the translated text. So what kind of rhetoric was implied there? Now here comes the notion of implied author. For example, implied author is the author a reader creates in his mind, according to Wayne Booth. And this implied author would actually guide the reader to get to some kind of signification. And this implied author is totally a mental construction of the reader. An actual reader is actually termed as the blood and flesh author by Wayne Booth. Now, if you see the implied author created by readers on reading a Tamil text is like a despot, because he controls the signification of the fiction in every level. Because in the authorial preface, you have a connotation, the Perumal Murugan kind of implies that he has grounded his fiction in historicity. He has grounded it in his fieldwork, and he has also mentioned that he has sources for it. And this was the question which was reiterated when he was taken to court. In S. Tamil Selvan versus the government of Tamil Nadu case. So they have actually pointed this out. They have actually pointed out that the Perumal Murugan has had claimed that there is a historicity, and there is, his field works has revealed that to some extent, whatever he has narrated in the novel is right, but he has failed to provide any kind of testament for that. So this kind of implies that this argument in Tamil Selvan versus government of Tamil Nadu concerning with this controversy, with this Perumal Murugan book controversy, kind of implies that the meaning that is produced in the Tamil source text is kind of controlled by the implied author, who was actually product of the authorial preface. But at the same time, we do not actually have that kind of implied author in the English translated text, in the translated English text. So here, the implied author created by the reader would be more a liberal one, not a despot who would control a signification at every level, but more liberal one. So you actually have a room to reimagine the signification there, to arrive at your own levels of signification. But the problem is this Tamil text, once again, this Tamil source text actually kind of becomes an extrinsic rhetoric on reading the translated English text. This is where the controversy actually begins, and this is where the controversy is actually rooted, because if you look at the arguments in Tamil Selvan versus the government of Tamil Nadu case, the people who sought ban for this novel, they have actually termed the novel as novelized history. Once again, this is based on the authorial preface or the foreword. And they also have gone to claim that, the Tamil text is much more better than the English text. Let me read that part. So, they have actually said that the novel has cast, okay, they have actually mentioned this. The English translation of the novel is stated to be more sophisticated and polished as compared to the Tamil edition, which is standard with abusive words, filthy language. But this is actually a statement contradicting what Sahitya Akademi has to say about the translation. In 2016, Sahitya Akademi awarded this novel the Best Translation Award to the translator Vasudevan, and it is stated that the translation retained original flavor without jarring. So the kind of implication is that they tend to, the people who pleaded against this novel, they tend to parallel the Tamil text with that of English translation. So this kind of implies that the English translation kind of, the Tamil source text kind of became an extrinsic rhetoric embedded in the English translation. Now, the second part of my argument is about a notion called rhetorical domain. For example, rhetorical domain is about, the rhetoric that you intended in your work might not be fully conveyed to the audience or the readers you target. Because the culture you belong to and the culture your audience belong to might exist in contradiction. So the rhetorical domain is very important when it comes to rhetoric. For example, if I tend to make a joke, for example, it could be a joke in my linguistic environment and it could signify some meaning. But if I tend to do the same in a different linguistic environment, then it would not actually give the intended meaning. So the rhetorical domain is very significant. To whom you are appealing and to whom you are representing is very significant. Now, in this Tamil Selvan versus Government of Tamil Nadu case, Perumal Murugan has made an interesting argument. He defends his novel by saying that it is actually the duty of the writer to become the voice of the victim and marginalized, or they would go unheard. Now, this is very significant because he is kind of positioning himself as a representative of the plethora of people like women and the marginalized and whatever. But in this novel, it is the women who are victimized, and so it kind of implies that he kind of tries to become a representative of women. But on the other hand, we also see that his rhetorical domain is incompatible with the audience he tried to represent. So, which is also significant, which is also part of the argument that was made against Perumal Murugan. So once again, I'm reading from the case. The novel has cast aspersions on the women folk of Tirchangood town of such serious nature that women folk who visit the temple are faced with loud comments by strangers and bystanders, and they are now even afraid to participate in the car festival. It is aforesaid the circumstances that ban is sought of the novel from being reprinted, published, circulated, marketed, and so on. It kind of implies that there is this contradiction between the audience he tries to represent and him and the author. So this is because of the rhetorical domain, because there is an inconsistency when it comes to rhetorical domain. Now, Another significant aspect, and I think I have run out of time, so I'll just finish it off. Is that Wednesday Booth talks about rhetoric. So rhetoric is actually the conception in which when rhetoric kind of becomes a misunderstanding, what we he kind of uses this term to refer to that scenario. So as the common source text kind of becomes an extrinsic rhetoric, the meaning intended or the intention of the author, despite despite not having the authorial preface, kind of creates creates a different implied author determined by the extrinsic rhetoric embedded in the source text, which becomes the root of the controversy, and this has created the rhetoric key. So that's my paper is all about. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Guhan. You have presented your paper in a very detailed manner. We appreciate you. And Mr. Vishal, shall I
Yes,
know?
yes, ma'am.
Shall
Yes,
I
ma'am.
know the fifth person who is going to present?
Sure, ma'am. I'll welcome her, ma'am. Just a second.
Whether she is here?
She's here, ma'am. Miss Bharti, research scholar from University of Jammu.
Okay.
Uh, is she here? Miss Bharti?
Now also she is not here.
Ma'am, she's here, but Bharti, Miss Bharti from Jammu, please unmute yourself.
Hello,
Yeah, Miss Bharti, here you guys. Please present your presentation. Are you audible?
I myself Bharti, Research Scholar, University of Jammu.
Okay, okay. Ma'am, but please wind it up a little early, ma'am. Please. We are as soon as possible,
Hello,
ma'am.
use of
Hello.
technology, teacher education, and integrated approach.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you
Please
can
present,
proceed.
ma'am. We are audible, ma'am. Please.
Use of technology and in teacher education and integrated approach. Role of ICT in teaching learning process. The potential use of ITC in educational setting goes far behind the provision of direct instruction. In the domain of instruction, though there are broad classes of application, ICT can be applied as an object of instruction, as a tool of instruction, and as an instructional material. ICT as an object of instruction, ICT as a tool of for instruction, ICT assisted instruction. ICT as an object of instruction, when a learner is studying ICT, the computer and associated software act object of instruction. In information and technology literary course, the student learn how to operate and access information using the internet, ICT as a subject of study. ICT as a tool of instruction, the learner learns to solve complex calculations with increased power and speed of ICT. Even a small microcomputer can analyze data, perform repeated calculation, or even gather data when hooked up to laboratory equipment or subjects. ICT assisted instruction. ICT helps online education through e-learning by both synchronous type and asynchronous type. In synchronous type, facilitator and the learner interact with each other at the same time. And in asynchronous type, collaborative learning brings student and facilitator together on computer screen. ICT generated instructional material. These include creating instructional material by multimedia techniques such as Microsoft PowerPoint, Point, Lotus, and freelance graphics with sound and motion. Interactive multimedia programs allow one to study at their pace and branch into the areas of interest. Presentations using multimedia tools were more effective than an ordinary presentation using charts. Now we have approaches to integrating ICT in teaching learning process. ICT, especially through internet, brought a change and a big revolution in the world of communication, whether it is market or teaching learning process. There are various technologies which came into existence. For instance, RFID, radio frequency identification, which consists of computer chip and an electronic monitoring system which tracks the location of a chip and can update information on it. And it was initially introduced in departmental stores to monitor and prevent the theft of goods. Similarly, some trends in technology which impact teaching learning activities are wireless connectivity, merging of technology, then development in portable devices, availability of high-speed communications, visual emergent system, intelligent applications. The benefits of integrating IC in teaching learning process are motivate students, student teachers work with more productivity, sharpen student information age skills. Then the various issues arising today's integration of ICT in teacher education are accountability and standard issues. Teacher wonder whether technology meets the required curricular standards. How does it influence children's education? Then funding for educational technology. Difficulties faced in creating technology-enabled environment which are a little expensive both in installation and maintenance. Willing links by the authorities and policymakers to accept and provide fund makes a remarkable change. Then digital divide. Already these tools and technologies have created a wide gulf between the rich and poor people, institutions and the nations and etc. Then another one issue, racial and gender equity. Most of the science and technology related careers are dominated by males and ethnic groups, so it should be introduced at an early stage so that there is no racial and gender equity. Then virtual learning. Much of the virtual online learning is happening. It is feasible for all categories of students to use this successfully with online learning environment. Is it on par with face-to-face learning? Then privacy and safety. It requires a lot of safety measures to be taken by the users to protect their privacy by protecting their personal data. Then viruses and hacking. It is very fatal sometimes when the data get affected by viruses. That creates crisis. Also, hacking creates many problems for users who totally hang online and other online operations as data and information get destroyed by viruses and hacking. Online plagiarism. Much information and data is accessible to everyone. Here, the question of plagiarism creeps in. Has difficult to control and take measures to stop such practices. Regulation to technology. Much criteria is there about the ban of technology and various domains of life, including education. Then, information literacy. Without knowing such technology, teachers as well as learners cannot utilize such available information. Then, there are various issues I have told you. Then there are recommendations regarding the use of ICT in teacher education. ICT must form the compulsory part of curriculum, but not as a separate subject of study, but embedded in all the subjects that have at every level of educational system. It is expedient on educational planners to make ICT an integral component of school subjects so that students can be educated from the very beginning and the importance of ITC, which is very helpful for the teachers. The preparation of teachers and teacher education. Integration of ICT in teacher requires both training on the part of teacher educators as well as the teachers. This training must deal with two aspects. Technical training, how to use and maintain ICT equipment and software. Second, integration of technologies into the curricula requires huge magnitude. Training is how to integrate ICT use into the curriculum is necessary. Such training should include effective ICT teaching methods and the use of discipline-specific applications. For such programs, teachers are selected using a variety of such as prior experience with ICT in education, staff development expertise, and the commitment to the program by the school and district administration. These individuals receive the intensive training course to master technical details and approaches to integrating ICT into the curricula. Once trained, they return to their educational institutions and provide ICT training and support for their peers. Such programs may also include ongoing long-term support for the trainers, including site visit, computer-based conferences, and email advice. In large geographical areas, the responsibility for such training and continuing support may be delegated to regional ICT's consortia coordinated by the central administrative body. Educators must be engaged in translating theory into practice and thinking critically about how ICT can most effectively enter their classrooms, schools, and communities. ICT integration of ICT based lesson plans should be included in preparing during teaching practices micro by following steps. Determination of relative advantage. Teacher should focus on these topics, not on technologies. He should use technology-based method when it offers a solution with sufficient relative advantage. He should estimate the impact and consider the required effort and expense. Then objective and assessment. A teacher educator should make his statement of objectives observable and measurable for the outcome expected from using new method. Focus should be on the result and not on the process. Best ways of assessment should be employed, such as rubrics or checklists to assess complex tasks or products, observation instruments to measure frequency of behavior, written tests to assess skill achievement outcomes, Likert scale to assess attitude outcomes, and so on. Design of instructional strategies. A teacher education should design instructional strategies in the light of content, objectives, and student characteristics. Group approach, and content approach. Focus should be on the use of technology to best support this method and to prepare students to adequately use technology. Then preparation of the instructional environment. A teacher should use between the computers, copies of software and media, access to peripherals, handouts, and their other materials needed to carry out the instructional strategy. Then the teacher should focus on the arrangement of resources to support instruction and learning and planning, and is required to make sure that technology source work well, that can be troubleshooting or backup plans, etc. Evaluation and revision of integration strategy. At the end, a teacher or educator should evaluate the working of ICT integrated strategies by achievement test, attitude or by student comment. On the basis of evaluation, integration strategies can be improved to make it work better by rescheduling technical skills or efficiency. Subject-specific models of integration in teaching learning process need to be devised. There should be introduction of new skills that have to be practiced during micro-teaching sessions of teacher training, a scale of integration of ICT. Standard service arrangement purchased separately are included in the purchase of ICT equipment and software. Typically cover regular maintenance and repair costs, may ever include email or telephone support to reduce large workloads for existing staff, backlogs of computer, and most importantly, computers were out of service. Financial help should be provided to institute in the form of funds from government and NGOs and as donation from community members and all stakeholders of education. In the last, to conclude, I can say that though India facing many challenges in providing access to basic services, it tried to invest ICT in educational system to raise ICT skills in India and move towards information society. Thus, educators should focus on the use of ICT to improve learners' learning, and teacher plans a program, school administrator purchase hardware and software, and educational system officer develop policy and strategic plan as a rationale for investment. So it is the responsibility of all the stakeholders to create and adopt all these information and communication technologies and integrate these as a pedagogical tools for curriculum transactions in everyday teaching learning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhakti.
Okay, ma'am. Well,
Anyhow, you have done a good work on the teaching learning process, curricular, and different types of teaching method.
yes, ma'am.
You have done a deep study in all those things. Thank you, Bharti.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
Okay. Today, now, in this fifth session, we have seen 5 papers, and I appreciate all the 5 papers. And I appreciate all the 5 papers, all the participants. You have done your part in a nice manner. Thank you, Onnanchal. Now I hand over the remaining part in the hands of Mr. Vishal.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your presence and the presenters along with their work and research. We got a chance to learn so much being part of this session.